Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I've worked hard to build a successful business with my husband. We own a company that operates in multiple states within the death care industry, and I'm proud of what we've achieved despite my difficult past. My grandparents raised me after adopting me when I was young, saving me from an abusive household where my biological mother stood by and watched as my stepfather tormented me both physically and mentally. He even tried using me as free childcare for the kids they had together. My grandparents were my real parents in every way that mattered. They protected me, loved me, and gave me a chance at a normal life. They both passed away. My grandfather 19 years ago and my grandmother 10 years ago. I hadn't spoken to my biological mother or stepfather in about 3 years when I received the news of her passing this April. I was in the kitchen cooking when one of our employees called. His brother lived next door to my biological mother, and he wanted to express his condolences. I had a feeling someone would show up at my house that night, but nobody came. The next day I stayed home just in case they showed up. I didn't want them harassing my mother-in-law if I wasn't there. I was sitting on the edge of my bed when my mother-in-law came to tell me there was a man at the door asking for me. I expected it to be my biological mother's brother, who's just as narcissistic as she was, but instead, it was my former stepfather. When I opened the door, I immediately told him he wasn't welcome in my home and threatened to call the police if he didn't leave. He sneered at me through the doorway and taunted me about showing my face despite my mother's death the previous night. I coldly told him that I already knew about her death and didn't care, adding that, as far as I was concerned, my mother had died 10 years ago. He dismissed my comment with a whatever and revealed his true purpose. He wanted me to pay half of the burial costs. When I flatly refused to give him anything, I asked about the children he had with my biological mother. He admitted they couldn't afford to help with the costs. His face twisted with anger, knowing full well about our company's success. He then threatened to put my name on the funeral home paperwork to force me to pay. I called his bluff, reminding him that I worked in the death care industry and knew they wouldn't allow that. When he threatened to take me to small claims court, I told him to go ahead, explaining that I would have my attorney present the adoption papers showing both biological parents had relinquished their rights. I also pointed out that the camera to the left of his head was recording everything. He completely lost it at this point. He started yelling about how I owed him help, claiming I was the reason my grandparents wouldn't have anything to do with the children he had with my mother. I corrected him, explaining that their decision was because of how he had treated me, and it was ultimately their choice. When he continued ranting and raving on my porch, I demanded he leave my property. When he refused, I had to call the police to have him removed. Later that day, he took to Facebook to complain about how disrespectful I was. In response, I simply uploaded the video of our interaction. Shortly after, his sister sent me a message apologizing, saying he had no idea my grandparents had taken me because of his actions. He tried having his attorney contact me, but that effort failed as soon as I sent them my adoption papers. The situation became even more satisfying when he discovered he could barely find a funeral home to take her body. We work with most of the local ones, and none of them wanted to deal with his attitude after hearing about the situation. It's been almost 6 months now, and he's still going around telling everyone I wouldn't help him. But I don't care anymore. I learned long ago that you can't reason with entitled people who think the world owes them something. My real parents, my grandparents, taught me better than that, and I'm at peace with my decision. For context, I, female 35, have a son that was born when I was married to my first husband. I was young when he was born, and his father was abusive to me. My ex-husband's mom was constantly in our lives, trying to take over and make my son hers. I left my ex when I was in my early 20s, and my ex-mill ended up taking my son into another state and filing for custody. She went to a state that has grandparents' rights, as ours didn't. I fought with her for years and ended up getting remarried to my current spouse, and we had a son together when I was in my mid-20s, a boy who is now 10. I see my oldest son only during the summer and the holidays. I finally got the court case moved to our local court, and the judge acknowledged I was wronged and ordered shared custody and visitation. My ex-mill argued that my son needed to stay with her during the week because of school, and the judge agreed so he could finish high school in a familiar environment. My ex-mill has ruined my son just like she did her own. She's given him any and everything he's wanted and asked for. She's taught him no respect and kept him very sheltered. She literally jumps on people if they don't give him his way. So in turn, my son is loud, violent, and all around sad to be around. During his Halloween visit, his problematic behavior became apparent immediately. My husband's mom lives with us, and she isn't well. She's doing chemo. She's been a big help with my youngest son so that I could help my husband with our business. My youngest is a delight to be around. He's polite, funny, and respectful. When I picked up my oldest son, he immediately became angry because his phone died and my truck charger wasn't compatible. He demanded I exit the interstate to purchase an overpriced charger from a truck stop. When I refused and suggested he make a packing list for future visits, he became more agitated. Upon noticing his younger brother's tablet was charging, he asked about using that charger. When I explained it wouldn't work with his Android phone, he dismissed my knowledge and forcibly took the charger anyway. After failing to make it fit, he threw it into the back seat. Though my youngest quietly retrieved and reconnected his charger, I had to reprimand my older son for his unacceptable behavior. The next day, he was still angry about having to wait for a charger and complained about me to his grandmother. When my husband and I left for the office, my mother-in-law offered to take him to the treat trail for Halloween. He rudely rejected her offer, prompting my husband to scold him for his disrespect. Later, while they were at the treat trail, he called demanding Hardee's food. When my mother-in-law explained there was food at home and it would be a while before she could return, he responded with profanity and hung up. The situation escalated when my mother-in-law returned home to find herself locked out. My older son told her through the door that she was being punished and would have to wait outside until either he chose to let her in or I returned home. When she insisted he open the door and called me crying, I contacted him to demand he follow house rules or face consequences. Upon arriving home, I found him blocking the doorway while my mother-in-law and younger son waited in the car. He maintained that this was her punishment for refusing his demands. When I tried entering, he physically pushed me back outside. After a second attempt, where he pushed my face, I warned him about calling the police. His response to my calling the police was explosive. He emerged from the house in a rage, attempting to take my phone while shouting threats and profanity. He then turned his anger toward his younger brother, expressing hatred and making death threats, claiming he was my only true son, as the firstborn from my first marriage. After my mother-in-law secured my younger son in her car, my older son began attacking the vehicle, damaging the windows and windshield. When my husband arrived and tried to restrain him, my older son threatened legal action against him. When police arrived and contacted my ex-mill, she attempted to blame us for provoking him and claimed jurisdictional issues due to his residency in another state. The officer dismissed these arguments, especially after learning a neighbor had both called 911 and captured the incident on security cameras. In a subsequent phone call, my ex-mill insisted I would be a bad mother for having him arrested and defended his actions. When questioned about the true son comments, she expressed beliefs about him being my only legitimate heir due to being from my first marriage, citing divorce as a sin. I rejected this logic and expressed my frustration with his destructive behavior. During his juvenile detention hearing, I supported the decision to place him in a group home, despite my ex-mill's protests. The evidence from officers and neighbors supported this decision. In a recent update during a meeting with his in-house therapist, they suggested moving him to either a therapeutic foster home or a psychiatric unit due to his unmanageable behavior, including making sexual and physical threats to female staff. My ex-husband and his wife, when contacted by ex-mill, refused involvement, citing his past violence toward their daughters. During my final conversation with him, he attempted to manipulate me by demanding I recant my statements, threatening punishment upon his return home. When I refused, he escalated his threats, even suggesting my husband's removal would improve his behavior. After examining his phone, we discovered messages between him and X-Mill joking about killing me and referring to his younger brother as an abomination due to my second marriage. When I told X-Mill about keeping his phone as evidence, she responded with hostile messages and attempted to deflect by insulting my deceased father. The situation remains unresolved as we await decisions about his placement, either in a therapeutic setting or a lockdown unit. The judge has prohibited his return home due to safety concerns for my younger child. Though CBS is now involved and suggested surrendering him to state custody, but I've refused this option. I was running on fumes and coffee back in 1998, working for an IT service company that had landed a massive contract with one of the major US airlines. Our job? Complete overhaul of their entire system. Ticketing, reservations, operations, the works. We were ripping out those old-school green screen terminals and replacing everything with fresh Windows PCs and modern printers. The kind of project that looks great on paper until you're actually doing it. The airline, in their infinite wisdom, decided to rush the training for their frontline staff. Classic management move, right? The agents barely had time to learn the basics before we rolled out the system, and naturally, there were bugs everywhere. The printers were especially problematic. They'd randomly disconnect, and you needed to know specific commands to get them back online. I basically lived in airports for 6 months straight. 56 different airports to be exact. My life became a blur of terminals, security checkpoints, and identical hotel rooms. I could probably navigate any airport in the country blindfolded by that point. This one day, I had just wrapped up an installation at one airport and was waiting to catch my flight to the next one. The line at the gate was moving at a glacial pace because, surprise, surprise, the ticket printer was acting up. The gate agent was clearly getting frustrated, repeatedly clicking things on her screen while the line grew longer. I leaned out of line and asked the agent if she had tried using the release and reconnect commands for the printer. Before the agent could even respond, this older woman, about 10 people behind me in line, decided to make her presence known. She sneered that the agent didn't need my help and demanded to know who I thought I was. The contempt in her voice was thick enough to cut with a knife. I turned around and looked her straight in the eye, explaining that I had literally installed the system and was the person going around the country setting it up. She scoffed and sarcastically replied that she was the Queen of England. The gate agent, who had been watching this exchange, finally spoke up. She asked for my help, mentioning that she'd been struggling with the printer for the last 20 minutes. I stepped out of line and walked behind the counter, very aware of Karen's disapproving glare burning holes in my back. She started protesting loudly, saying I couldn't go back there because it was a restricted area. The gate agent quickly shut her down by explaining that I was authorized as part of the implementation team. I quickly typed in the commands I'd probably entered 1,000 times by this point. The printer whirred back to life, spitting out the backlog of boarding passes. The gate agent thanked me profusely, saying she had been about to call technical support. I told her it was no problem and reminded her about the sequence. Release command first, then reconnect, explaining that it works every time. I walked back to my place in line, making sure to flash Karen my brightest smile as I passed her. She was practically purple with embarrassment at this point. She tried to save face by complaining that they should have trained the staff better. The gate agent shot back that I was actually one of the people who had been training them, then asked everyone to have their IDs ready since the printer was now working. When I finally reached the counter to get my boarding pass, the gate agent printed it with no issues. She thanked me again, telling me how many times that printer had given her trouble that day. I just shrugged it off, saying I was just doing my job. Literally. When I walked down the jet bridge, I could still hear Karen complaining to anyone who would listen about security protocols and unauthorized personnel. But hey, at least she got her boarding pass printed without any more delays, thanks to the very person she tried to shut down. The irony wasn't lost on me as I settled into my seat, ready to head to airport number 57. Another day, another printer, another entitled passenger who thought they knew better than the actual expert. At least this time I got to prove them wrong in spectacular fashion. I've been working at McDonald's for about 8 months now. It's not a bad job for a high school student. Decent pay, flexible hours, and mostly nice co-workers. The key word there is mostly because some of our customers, well, let me tell you about what happened last night. I work at one of the busiest McDonald's in our area. It's right off the highway in the Midwest, so we get all kinds of people coming through. But there's this one customer, let's just call her Karen, who's become infamous among our staff. She comes through our drive-thru at least 3 times a week, always ordering the exact same thing: 2 large iced teas and a large Colombian coffee. Now, this Colombian coffee isn't your regular McDonald's brew. It's this special blend we sell that's way stronger and more bitter. Honestly, it's fitting that it's her favorite. Matches her personality perfectly. Now, at our store, we have this unwritten rule. Whenever someone orders 3 or more drinks, we automatically give them a drink tray. It's just common sense, right? Makes it easier for everyone involved. But Karen? She has this bizarre hatred for drink trays. I mean, you'd think we were trying to hand her a box of poisonous snakes or something. She'll literally start yelling if you even try to give her one. Most of us regular employees know about her quirk. But my co-worker who works at the window didn't know about it because she usually works morning shift when I work nights. She had no idea what she was walking into. So last night, Karen comes through the drive-thru, places her usual order. My co-worker, being the efficient worker she is, puts the drinks in a tray. That's when it happened. Karen demanded to know what the tray was doing there. My co-worker politely tried to explain that she was just giving her the drinks, but Karen immediately cut her off, ordering her to take the drinks out of the tray right away. When my co-worker attempted to explain that she was just trying to make things easier, she couldn't even finish her sentence. Karen grabbed the drink tray and threw it back through the window like she was trying out for the Olympic Frisbee team. The drinks went everywhere, splashing all over the window and my co-worker's uniform. Thank God the drinks weren't hot, or someone could have gotten seriously hurt. My co-worker was absolutely shocked. I mean, who wouldn't be? She immediately went to get our shift manager, but as luck would have it, our general manager was actually in the store at that moment. And let me tell you, our general manager doesn't mess around. He went straight to the window where Karen was still waiting, probably expecting us to remake her drinks and apologize to her or something. He asked her about the issue with her order. Karen complained that the employee had tried to force a tray on her when she never asked for one. Our general manager told her that this didn't give her the right to throw things at employees and that such behavior was completely unacceptable. Karen tried to defend herself with the customer is always right line, but our general manager wasn't having it. He told her that customers aren't right when they're assaulting staff and told her this would be her last visit to any of our locations. He warned her that if she returned to any of the 8 McDonald's restaurants in our franchise, she would be permanently banned from all locations and the authorities would be contacted for trespassing. Karen protested, saying we couldn't do that because she'd been coming here for years. But our general manager told her that he could and would do exactly that. He told her her drinks would be ready at the next window and gave her a final warning. When she got to my window, she was fuming. Her face was all red and she looked like she was about to explode. I told her here were her drinks, and she immediately snapped that she didn't want a drink tray. I just replied that I knew that and handed her the drinks individually, making sure to move as slowly as possible while maintaining eye contact. She snatched them from my hands and sped off, tires screeching. But here's the thing, she actually had the nerve to come back the very next day. Unfortunately, not all of our managers had been updated about the situation yet, so she got away with placing another order. But one of our managers immediately texted our general manager about it. I can't wait until she tries to come back again. All of our managers will be prepared and will finally get to see her face when the police show up to escort her off the property. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.